Ladies and gentlemen, Binnall of America!
And now, ladies and gentlemen, your host, Tim Binnall.
No commercials, no subscriptions, no network, no rules. And at the end of the day, my friends, no comparison. Welcome back to another edition of BOA The Revival. Really, really looking forward to this week's program, my friends. We are welcoming back to the show one of my all-time favorite Binnall of America guests. And I know I say that about a lot of the folks who have been on the show over the years. Hell, we've had a 20-year run. Of course, there are a lot of great guests who are my favorites, but this guy in particular is one of those guests who I always learn a lot from, and we always have these riveting conversations, and he always covers these various unsolved mysteries and quirky cases from the past that have always fascinated me. And of course, I'm talking about the one and only Gian Quasar. And Gian actually appeared on Binnall of America way back for the first time ever on December 8th, 2008. So we're looking at 17 years ago almost was the first time he appeared on BOA, which is crazy to think about. And back then he was talking about the Bermuda Triangle. And then in 2010, he was on the program to, I believe, talk about his Bigfoot book. And then in 2014, he was on to talk about his Jack the Ripper book. And then in 2017, he appeared on the show alongside Michelle Cruz to talk about the East Area Rapist, original Night Stalker. So as you see, he's covered a real array of cases over the years. And he's produced a whole bunch of books. Into the Bermuda Triangle is the one we talked about back in the day. Scarlet Autumn, The Crimes and Seasons of Jack the Ripper. Also recasting Bigfoot. There's a few others in there as well that we'll get into. And as I said, he was last on the show in 2017, so it's long overdue for a return to BOA. When I reached out to him last week, he was like, "Well, I thought you stopped." I'm like, "Yeah, I did, but now then I restarted. We were revived, so it's long overdue to get him on here for the revival." And the timing couldn't be better, as he's got a new book out that just released this week, and folks will be hearing this probably in a couple of weeks, so it's definitely available now. HorrorScope, the Zodiac Killer Exposed. And that's what we're going to be getting into tonight, primarily, the Zodiac Killer. So with all that said, as I said, long overdue to get him back on the show. One of my all-time favorite Binnall of America guests. And as you can probably tell, folks, I'm real excited about this one. Gian Quasar, welcome back to Binnall of America. It's been a long time, my friends. It's going to be great chatting with you again.
Thank you for having me again.
As I said, it's been 8 years. How have you been, before we get into all that? You been all right in the last 8 years?
No.
Oh, geez. Oh, no.
Getting old, I'm getting sick, and everything's getting lame. And COVID put a stop on all my adventures, my quests, and all that.
I hear you, man.
I'm unaffected by it, but I've never had a symptom. But it's changed everything now. It's a very different world out there.
It certainly is. It's it's a dramatically different world from just 2017 when you and I last spoke. So, yeah, for sure. Well, hopefully this reunion tonight is the start of a turnaround for you. Now, tell me about the new book. It's just come out. I believe when we last talked, you were kind of working on it because you sort of look into a lot of these different things all kind of at the same time. Yeah.
Yes, it has been delayed several times, and people got quite angry with me over that. But one clue led to another, and I kept finding another lead that led to another, and the book was delayed years and years. I was expecting to be published by 2019. I began searching for Zodiac in 2012, I believe, so 13 years ago. But just, too much information continued to come forward, and I was able to get enough documentation that I had to continue to reinvestigate. See, the first half of the book or so is I wrote maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It is I put all the actual facts back in, none of the folklore, just the facts of the murders, vividly recreate them as the base to launch my own personal investigation. And so when I was writing that, I was not looking into any real suspect. This is not a book that is tailored to support an individual suspect.
Okay.
So I'm not editing out the crimes and accentuating one thing or the other to try and highlight my pet guy. It was after that I began my own investigation, and as I say, it just continued to snowball, and I had to continually postpone publication. It's now, I had to cut out a couple of chapters because it was simply too long, but altogether, what people are going to be reading is 112,000 words. So it's 348 pages long. And it is quite comprehensive. And then they will follow my investigation until I do name the Zodiac. I am able to identify him. And my great disadvantage is that people initially will not believe me because they're desensitized to all those claims. Someone's always out there, getting some article about them, or there's a book saying that they most certainly identified the Zodiac and he's their father or their uncle or past lover or something.
Right.
So I have asked, people to read the book. I've asked show hosts who've already contacted me to defer from interviewing me until they read the book. I didn't do that with you because you already know me, but these others did not know me.
Right.
And so it was all fair, fairness to me and them. They have to read the book because it's not what people are expecting.
Gotcha.
This is not just, my take on the Zodiac. This is not just putting everything in one volume. I actually go after the guy and I get him. I'm able to identify the man finally. And as I say, I'm at a great disadvantage for even claiming that because people will not believe me until they read the book.
Right.
I expect slowly, there'll be those who will take my side. There'll be arguments and debates and that sort of thing. But
okay. Now, go ahead.
I'm amazed at how it turned out. Is not what I was expecting.
All right. So we want people to buy the book, so I'm not just going to be like, okay, Gian, who's the fucking Zodiac, right? So
I hope no one does that with me because that's really going to irk me.
Right. So, like, I've been around the block, brother. I know how it works. So but do you outright name the individual in the book? Because and a lot of times the people, they use a pseudonym, they don't want to say who it is or whatever. Do you say, okay, it is this?
I name him. I name his criminal background. I name it all. Okay. And it's, it would be nice if I get the credit that, I solved it. But I have to tell you, it takes more. It'll be said that I identified the principal actor in the Zodiac crimes, and that would be fair. Solving it is something a little more. I don't uncover every motivation. I have to infer, I have to offer what it all is. And although I have to stick with the generally held view that only one person was involved, I do spend a lot of the book looking for an accomplice, and I do believe there was more than a conspiracy of silence. I am able to establish that beyond doubt, that there was more than one person who knew who the Zodiac was, and they would not turn him in. And that's how I was led to, one way I was led to my man. But it's a short step from conspiracy of silence to a conspiracy where there's other actors involved. And I did come to believe that there was someone else who was involved in the crime spree.
All right. Okay. So this is, we're going to dance around that. So okay, let me back.
Let me put it this way in the beginning before going over the crimes for the audience and the
we should definitely do. Yeah, we want to.
It's how I can come to my conviction.
Okay. All right. I have a bunch of different avenues I wanted to go down, but we'll go with that first. So we'll start there. Okay.
Let's go back in time to Lee Allen. Everybody who followed knows who Arthur Lee Allen was.
Right.
In 1971, he is approached yet again that he has been turned in, and there's thanks to Robert Gray Smith's rendition, there's the meeting at the Union Oil and Gas between Tosky, Armstrong, and Mel Nikolai and Lee Allen in Mike McNamara's office there, and they talk to him, and he is very gratuitous. He offers all this information that he read The Most Dangerous Game, and he's giving them information, and they see his watch. They look at his Zodiac Sea Wolf watch. It's a good Swiss diver's watch. And they come away generally believing that he's goading them. I interpret it differently, that he is in fact laying down an alibi and using these police officers as his alibi, that should they get the actual Zodiac and he's named as a conspirator or an accessory after the act, he can say, I have these interviews that I spoke freely about elements that became part of the Zodiac crime spree. So if I inspired anybody, it's purely incidental. We have to remember that he was turned in by Don Chaney, who said during one of their hunting expeditions in the foothills, Allen concocted this whole story that was in fiction, put in fiction terms, that he would hunt people at lovers' lanes. He would use Zodiac he would send letters to the police and use Zodiac as the handle.
Yeah.
And that's what got him turned in by Don Chaney.
Right.
And so that's why they're interviewing him. Let's go back. By this time when he's interviewed in 71, I can tell you that Allen was pretty certain that, yes, he did inspire the real Zodiac killer.
Interesting.
Let's go back to 1969. Zodiac sends a long-winded letter in November. It's 9 pages long. He includes his second cryptogram in there, which was only recently decoded in 2020. On the last page of his letter that accompanied the cryptogram, there is written in the middle of the page something completely out of place and incongruous, and it is, and I quote, "To prove I am the Zodiac, ask the Vallejo cop about my electric gun sight, which I used to start my collecting of slaves," unquote. In November 1969, this was a month after Lee Allen had been visited by John Lynch, a Vallejo detective, to see where he was during the Lake Berryessa attack.
Yeah.
By the Zodiac. Lee Allen was well known in Vallejo for shooting off his mouth about how he had this real nifty gun sight, the flashlight on the gun barrel, to use for night hunting. It was just night hunting. It was not anything else for game. And there's too many witnesses to that fact. And now here a month after he's visited by John Lynch, Zodiac writes that to the police.
Interesting. Okay.
Now, let's come forward to 2020. By a special computer programming, 3 men cracked the 340 cipher, which was included in that letter in November 1969.
Yeah.
In this decoding, it's, Zodiac says, I'm no longer afraid, to die, basically, because I have enough slaves for me now to serve me in paradise when I go. So basically, that was an admittance. He was already done killing people in November 1969, and he hid that fact in a complex cryptogram, which took a special computer 50 years later to decode it.
Right, right.
So he's done after Stein, after he sent the metropolitan area into a panic, the murder of Paul Stein in San Francisco, he was through. He was finished. And he's just writing letters now. He's engaging in a massive terrorist campaign in print. Let's go back. Now, we're back to November 1969. I can assure you that when that was published and that got around, Lee Allen knew exactly that he was being accused. That is an accusation against Lee Allen, pure and simple. And anybody in the East Bay hunting crowd would have known that, because Allen wasn't quiet about how real innovative his gun sight, his electric gun sight was.
Yeah.
Now, from the clues and genuine evidence that I uncovered, it didn't take Lee Allen long to figure out who this was. Now, it's implicit in Zodiac's statement to him, asked the Vallejo cop, what I quoted to you, that he was in fact downwind of Lee Allen's tall tales in the foothills while hunting, and that he didn't think Allen knew who he was, or else he would not have tried this stunt. But it's a perfect time to set up Lee Allen. He's done killing. He can now set up someone as easy as Lee Allen as the patsy.
Interesting. All right. Okay. So yeah.
But I was able to show that it didn't take Lee Allen long to figure out who this was.
Right.
Already in February 1970, he's passing around a letter sent to him by an old Atascadero inmate. He shows it to Phil and Joan Tucker. Others also saw it. Later on, he would tell a couple of other people that Zodiac had been at Atascadero, and the codes that he used were taught to him by a criminally insane murderer there. Well, he was also there.
Just
Lee Allen was a teacher technician at the hospital in the summer of 1962. I went back and I searched through all the court records, in the public notice, extemporaneous journals of who's sentenced to Atascadero, because you can't find it out any other way. Atascadero does not have to release anything. It's a state hospital. And I finally went through a number of people, winnowed them down, and came down to a couple guys. And I actually got the guy that wrote the letter to Lee Allen, this Atascadero inmate, who, according to Joan Tucker and Phil Tucker, the writing was that in felt pen like the Zodiac, and also contained coded messages, lettering similar to what Zodiac used. And so I found the guy who wrote that letter to Lee Allen, the guy that Lee Allen, said basically through inference was the Zodiac.
right.
And so I got him. He's a dead ringer for the Napa sketch of the Zodiac, and he had a hell of a nasty, sadistic background with parking dates.
Interesting.
And I got all the court records, 100 pages of this guy's court records, and what he was up to starting 1959. And he's there at summer. He spent 5 years in state bumper rooms, including Atascadero and Chino Men's Colony, longer than it's usual. And he was considered very seclusive, very intelligent. He even taught courses at Atascadero. And he's there in the summer of 62, and he had every hobby that Lee Allen had. He was an avid fisherman, hunter, car racer. He would stock car race. He was an avid boater. He knew Riverside and the Riverside Raceway. And so it's highly unlikely that he and Lee Allen did not have contact after he finally got sprung in 1966 from the state madhouse.
Yeah. Okay.
Not to get ahead of anything, but
yeah,
I was able to, to get the guy who was downwind of Lee Allen, the one who Lee Allen most certainly believed was the one setting him up. And in the Zodiac's own writing, that is an accusation against Lee Allen. Zodiac was downwind of him.
Okay.
And so Lee Allen's response, basically getting it around Vallejo and the East Bay area, that Zodiac had been at Atascadero, is, I would interpret it that's rather implicit in that he's getting the message back to Zodiac, you continue this and you're going to go down with me.
That's my question for you, Gian. Why
didn't he turn him in?
Right. If Lee Allen, everybody, Lee Allen may end up going down as the Zodiac just because by sheer, cultural momentum, if you will. You know what I mean? It's like when a lot of people just sort of don't think too far beyond it and go, oh, wasn't that Lee Allen guy? I thought they solved that. You know what I'm saying? And that happens a lot. And with him, it's like he's like intrinsically linked to this. So why would
I had to go into it, in detail. And I didn't really want to go into the past stuff about Lee Allen as much, but since it did help me get around to the actual Zodiac and a long investigation of the man, I had to go into these, the legend that Graysmith laid down, whether good or bad, about Lee Allen.
Why didn't he turn this guy in to clear his name?
Well, it's implicit in what he's doing that he knows there's ears about him in the East Bay and it'll get back to the Zodiac. And that's where I started uncovering a short-term brother-in-law, where I started uncovering other people within the East Bay outdoorsman crowd.
Yeah.
And that's where I got into more than just Lee Allen and a conspiracy of silence. And I don't think Alan truly understood. He feared there was a few guys involved. This is the era. This is the era, now 1970, 71. The Mansons are exposed. We've got the Weather Underground going underground in all their bombings. We have a lot of, the new left, the counterculture conspiracies that were genuinely going on. And I don't think Lee Allen knew how many people were truly involved, because the Zodiac's publicity game was very much paralleling the new left.
Okay.
And how they announced their bombings and how they spoke. And I think he feared more than one person. And he feared retribution.
Okay, that makes sense. Now,
I do go into all the names, as many as I could uncover.
So if he didn't roll over on this guy, why? I mean, did the police just have tunnel vision? They were so focused on him that they didn't think to look at this guy that you believe was the Zodiac Killer, or the?
Well, they would never have suspected him. He was perfectly safe in Santa Barbara. He had friends and family in East Bay, and was a frequent visitor there. He was extending his education after 5 years in the madhouse.
Yeah,
very intelligent. Car repossession was the business he did with his family when he got out. So you can go with that quite a ways. He was on a tight leash with his probation, but he was such a model of reform suddenly after 5 years of being considered very dark. One of the court-appointed psychiatrists said he's the most dangerous man I've ever encountered. And I quote him in there.
Wow.
Two of the psychiatrists, I have their full reports. I have Atascadero's reports. It was all placed with the court records. Interesting.
Okay, now the Zodiac community is pretty passionate and intense, let's say, for lack of a better term. Has this guy popped up on anyone's radar before? Have you had, anything?
I've never seen it. I don't associate with the Zodiac community, but but I did Google and everything, and he does not pop up with anybody saying anything. And I've left quite a paper trail with the courts and with archives, getting military records and everything.
Yeah.
And my investigation can be traced and into those of his contacts. Now, he is not the primary focus of my investigation initially. He is toward, I don't want to give too much away, but there are more people involved, and they all come back through hobbies to Lee Allen. And so when I name the principal actor, I'm not particularly naming the only Zodiac.
Right.
And that's where it gets very complex. That's where people, hopefully they do greet me with skepticism. I want them to read the book.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I don't want these announcements. Oh, he says it's this person. He's solved it. I want the book read because it's not what people are expecting.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not my daddy did it. It's not, I've got this, he looks like this sketch. The sketches are highly dubious. Even the Napa one, I did find a couple guys that looked like it, but the San Francisco one, that is almost always one used because it is so popular. It was one in all the print editions of the Zodiac case. The Zodiac, the San Francisco Police Department sketch of the Zodiac is just worthless.
Yeah.
It is inspired by the belief that a young serial cab robber did it, because that's what they thought they had. The kids in the room with the view told Armand Pellicetti, the responding officer, that the guy was in his early 40s that they saw. Yeah. The sketch says he's 25 to 30, and it makes it look like this young mongoose, skinny-looking guy. When Officer Don Falk finally gave his input a month later, he said the man he saw on Jackson Street was between 35 and 45, so he's giving a median age of 40 as well. And you see all these people offering, they're basing their pet suspect on the fact he looked like this San Francisco sketch, and context simply does not allow that to be considered really viable. I cannot rely on any of the sketches completely because we have a fact pattern which does not suggest Zodiac wore wigs, but that there was more than one man involved.
Right. That's what I want to ask you. Is there?
Well, the fact pattern then begins with Mike Mayhew, who was the survivor at Blue Rock Springs Park.
Yeah.
He said the guy was under 30 years old. He was stout, short, about 5'8", and he had light brown hair, almost blonde, curly, short. Then in San Francisco, the Stein murder, again, the kid said he had light reddish blonde hair. Don Falk said he also had light hair. This time it's cut into a crew cut. In between, we have the most prolonged view of the Zodiac by the three co-eds. And they say he's 6 to 6'2", that he's heavy, not bad looking. He's 30 or under. And he had dark brown or black hair styled. So it was a very out of date, out of fashion hairstyle, like something in the 50s.
Yeah.
Then Brian, that is not in perpetration. That is someone just hanging about, intent unknown. Brian Hartnell, however, said that his attacker was very heavy as well. He thought maybe 220 to 250, about 5'11", and through the eyelet in the mask, this is where Zodiac wore that strange hood, you could see his bangs, and they were a strand of dark brown hair. Now, this, again, then brings us back to the co-eds and their description. And so here we have initial description where he's blonde, short, curly hair, where his curls basically had been cut off in San Francisco, and he's got a crew cut, but he still has light, blondish, reddish hair. In between, we have a real heavy-set guy who is about 6 foot at least, and the footprint impression suggests about 220 feet. 220 pounds, rather.
Yeah.
So now this does not sound like the same person. It's not a question of the sketches. It's a question of very tangible, like footprint impressions. And he was 5'8" to 5'10" to Mike Mayhew. He's 5'8" to 5'10" to the people in San Francisco. He's 6 foot at least at Lake Berryessa. A very different hairstyle and color, and unquestionably a heavy guy, and he has a young man's voice.
Okay, so you're saying then is that you think that there were multiple perpetrators of these crimes? Is that what you're saying?
Personally, I have to identify one with Dogma in the book, and I go into the evidence of the other. But it is a fact there was one, obviously, that Zodiac did exist, and I lay out the evidence in my long search to find the blonde Zodiac, because I wish to tie him into the Shadow Zodiac crimes of Southern California, which would be the double murder of Dominguez and Edwards in Gaviota by Santa Barbara, 1963. The Swindles, San Diego, 1964, and very possibly Ray Davis in Oceanside, 1962. They're like the Zodiac crimes, only inverted. And none of my suspects, my prime ones, outside of my main guy, nor those who are around him within the extended outdoorsman crowd, were available to have been the Shadow Zodiac.
Interesting. Okay, so now I'm confused. So you're saying that there was one dude who did who did each of the ascribed Zodiac killings. It's not like a group of people or a pair of people or anything like that.
I personally wish to believe it's the one guy, but I do believe there is someone else. That is a personal. I will name one man as responsible, but I lay out the evidence for an accomplice.
Gotcha. All right. Now, do you have a theory for why? What always confounded me about the case is the really remarkable change in MO, where he's going after couples on lovers' lanes and whatnot. And then all of a sudden he goes and kills the cab driver, which seems just completely random and out of character for this guy. Do you have a theory for why he sort of broke the pattern and killed Stein, the cab driver?
because that would send San Francisco into the panic. He was trying to do that from the very beginning, from writing letters. You know, he threatened his kill rampage with his first set of 3 confession letters if the due date was not met to publish his first cryptogram. It really didn't do anything. Jack Stilts, the Vallejo chief of police, really cast doubt that the writer was the killer. He said the writer could have gotten this information from someone who was at the crime scene.
Yeah.
So he was asked to write back, give more particulars, and this is the only time Zodiac ever wrote back quickly. And that's when he called himself the Zodiac in his August 4 letter to the Examiner. And really, when he didn't, form his thoughts first, Zodiac just tended to brag. That's all his response really was. It was unverified. That's when he said he had a pencil flashlight on his gun, the electric gun sight. There's no way for them to verify that. He said Mayhew was in the back seat in this location. The girl, at Lake Herman Road was in this position, but it really didn't do its job. Jack Stilts was still very vocal that this was a crank and it was not the same as the killer. So then it's quiet for 2 months. Zodiac attacks at Lake Berryessa, his famous LARPing live action role playing his own paper character.
Yeah.
Then he writes on the car door. And that leaves no doubt whatsoever. Clearly, just looking at the car door, the same person who wrote the letters wrote on that car door. And that was the purpose, to prove he was one and the same, not just the killer, not just a writer, but he was also at the crime scene. And still, Lake Berryessa is far away from the metropolis. And it didn't have the effect people, Zodiac wasn't even a name that was firmly fixed in people's eyes. He'd only used it once. He was more known as the Code Killer or the Cipher Slayer or the Boastful Slayer. And then he gets rid of Stein. He kills Stein in San Francisco and threatens to snipe school buses. And that starts it. That starts the Autumn of Terror. And that cements him in the public mind now as the Zodiac. He's sending more letters and another cryptogram, which we already discussed in November. And there's just this huge media, blitz, and Walter Cronkite picks up on it, and goes national. And that's really when the Zodiac Killer, as we know him, was born. Before that, it was just some guy who was killing out in the boondocks and may or may not have been the person writing the letters.
Right. Well, it's ironic then, if that's when it took off, that would be, he was done killing at that point, right?
Yes, he was.
Intention. Yeah.
And well, from the evidence, this is a massive LARP within a LARP, live action role play, which was extremely popular in universities in America in the 1960s. And from how Zodiac behaved at the crime scenes, the murders did not mean much to him. What was important was his terror campaign, his absolutely pointless terror campaign. People try and say he was just a sex killer. So that's why he stalked lovers' lanes. At the same time that they're also easy game, frankly. They're out in isolated areas. He can drive by and shoot them. It's fairly safe and quick and easy from a killer's point of view.
Yeah.
But he then confessed twice on the phone, which is pointless for being a sex killer. Then he engages in this elaborate paper persona of the Zodiac on paper, which is only compromising him. It's leaving evidence. And then he even goes to the extent, he fell so in love with his paper creation that he actually makes that hood and wears it at Lake Berryessa in a very compromising position. He was a quarter of a mile away from the road and escape.
Yeah.
He went out of his way to stab them at Lake Berryessa. And this is someone whose alter ego, whose terror campaign in print, whose live action role play came to mean more to him than the actual murders.
Right. Interesting.
And that is basically, why would an individual serial killer wish to go to that length?
So what you're saying is really it was for lack of a better term, like he wasn't getting off on the killings, he was getting off on the terror that they were that he was trying to ignite.
Yes, but he was also LARPing. He was live action role playing Heinlein's The Moon is a Harsh Mistress more than he was live action role playing Most Dangerous Game via Lee Allen. He probably never read the book, but he knew Lee Allen's story. And if you know what Robert Heinlein's book Moon is a Harsh Mistress is about, it's a moon colony that wants to break away from Earth. It's a former prison colony. And to do so, they must engage in a lot of disinformation, an entire disinformation campaign. They must learn how to code and break codes. That's essential to it. They must be very cellular in how their organization is designed. And this book inspired, Weather Underground, members of that to be very cellular. Brotherhood of Eternal Love. Live action role playing a novel, for whatever reasons back then, was something done in universities. The entire counterculture was a live action role play of Huxley's Island. Timothy Leary, and others of the beat truly admired that book, and that basically that's the beginning of the counterculture commune. And
Okay.
and then Ricardo Gomez, who was a Zodiac investigator, also discovered that in universities in Illinois, they had a LARP of The 10th Victim, which is a book and movie adaptation, where in a futuristic society, a hunter goes out and by the laws of this society, he can hunt people and kill them. And they, is far more sanguine on the university. As was played, the victim would be stealthily passed a note reading thereon, this is your hunter speaking. You are now dead. And Gomez notes that that's how Zodiac addressed his entire audience. This is the Zodiac speaking.
So it's
live action role playing is really throughout this. And when you understand that the culture of the time, you understand that Zodiac was engaged in a massive live action role play.
interesting. Okay, so why then did he stop killing after Stein?
I think it got too dangerous. He saw the police car pass him, but also I think something else was achieved, and that was, the terror, the unsettling of the establishment. To what extent he was on drugs, I don't know. He may not have been on drugs at all. But back then, LSD and marijuana and hash were quite commonplace. And he was in Southern California. He was based there. And he was in the educational system yet again. He was within all the environment of the militant youth.
Yeah.
And he's using their language, basically. If you listen to the reports of the Weather Underground and how they spoke, this is the, fifth communication from the Weatherman Underground and all this stuff, or the New World Liberation Front. This is the Unit 3 of the New World Liberation Front. That's how the preambles. He's using very much militant left dialogue, and he's basically engaged in his own personal, upsetting the establishment, exposing the establishment. Yeah. And now with my guy, it could be for, sending him away for 5 years of his prime life in a madhouse in the state, madhouse. State bedlam. That's for the reader. I leave the reader to, give the options, and, you cannot get into the mind of a man long gone.
Right. So this guy has passed away since.
Oh, yeah. I would not be able to name him otherwise. I'm able to name a few people because they passed over, and I avoid anybody who's living who might be a relative. I don't even imply the existence of some unless it's completely unavoidable. That so forth, married on this date, divorced on this date or something. It's completely historical statement of fact without probing into living people whatsoever.
Now, have you passed this information over to any authorities who would look at it and give you an insight as to whether you're on the right track or not? I mean, is it possible like that you could put this book out and they might look into it and go, okay, we're going to get to the bottom of this because we think you nailed it or something like that? Or you think that this case is so old that, short of some insane discovery, like someone finds the costume in their uncle's attic or whatever, that it'll never be officially solved?
Some detectives on their own may elect to go do that. I did have communication with one of those involved in what I call the Zodiac group, was downwind of Lee Allen by hobby as well, and is also his life has gone into there. His writing is very suggestive of the Zodiac. But I would suspect from the detectives I have known, and back when the EAR case, I was in communication with quite a few, that there would be someone who, as this builds, will take it up, whether it's someone in Santa Barbara, Riverside, Napa, or Vallejo. I don't know. I don't know if San Francisco will. They shy away from that. And frankly, I go into the disinformation game, and San Francisco was disinformation for the Zodiac. He had no association. He had no English. He used English expressions. He wasn't from England. He was not an Anglophile. It was all Heinlein's disinformation game to protect himself.
Yeah.
His mistakes, he made that one mistake about confirming his car color was brown. Mike Mayhew had said that it was reported in the Vallejo Times Herald on July 7 or 8, I believe, that Mayhew said the killer's car color was brown, of a similar brown to the car they were in, the Corvair, Chevy Corvair.
Right.
And when Zodiac writes to the newspapers, he said, the police know my car color is brown because of a Chablis Negro who was by the phone booth. When he hung down the phone, it rang again. And the guy looked over and saw him. And so that's a rather interesting mistake on his part. So that's how the police knew my car color was brown. Well, really, they knew it from Mayhew.
Have
he does not seem to have been in a position to have read the Vallejo Times Herald. So that would very much strongly indicate he was not a local to the East Bay and was in a position to read that. And of course, that was just one of the clues that led me to look fairly far and wide down to Southern California and east into Sacramento and so forth for someone viable who following the evidence.
So what you're theorizing or saying here essentially is that this guy, I'm going to try and unpack this a little bit. This guy who you name in the book, we want folks to get the book. So it wouldn't make a difference anyway, quite frankly. Like you could say his name is Tim Binnall and it wouldn't fucking make a difference to anyone. You know what I'm saying? So like so anyone who's kind of like rolling their eyes, it won't make a difference, folks. We could say it was Darby Allen. It would, it doesn't matter. So you're saying this character, this
I can say Gary. Gary is his first name.
Oh,
there's
okay.
Gary, there's Steve, there's Bill, there's Lee, there's a few Lees. There's James.
Okay, so let me get back to unpacking. So the Gary, so you're saying this Gary guy, he's the killer. He was an acquaintance of Arthur Lee Allen and picked up some of his sort of mannerisms or interests or peccadillos and sort of absorbed them into the Zodiac character in order to implicate him as the patsy in the killings, which he was performing as a live action role play to create terror in the Bay Area. Did I get all that right?
Not exactly. He didn't absorb it. To frame Lee Allen, he was downwind of him and picked it up, and this became the live action role play. He live action role played Lee Allen's inventive crime scenario that he hatched during his fiction, during his Foothills, hunting.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And
So,
then he tried to cast away Lee Allen, so he did not believe Lee Allen knew who he was.
okay, so he was live
completely
action.
downwind of him, and he did know him personally. Yes, well,
Right. So he was sort of emulating, to use a less, because to me, I have a hard time in a sense with the live action role play term. I just think of like Renaissance fairs and shit. So it's, for me, it's hard to wrap my mind around. So he was emulating Arthur Lee Allen's
story.
fantasy of being a serial killer. He was like, okay, I heard this guy talking about being a serial killer. I'm going to be a fucking serial killer. And they'll think it was him because the way all these little sort of details will point to him, because I'm purposely emulating Arthur Lee Allen in a variety of ways. Did I get it right that time?
No.
Okay.
No, after he was done killing, he did try and take the heat off by, directing them toward Allen. And that is, the inference is that Allen didn't know who he was, but he was within ripples from Allen and heard through others the story. There was not, Allen told more than Cheney and Panzarella the story, and it is something that resonated with the killer, and it was something he used to an extent that obviously he believed in it enough to pointlessly wear that hood at Lake Berryessa.
Yeah, Gary. Yeah.
That was not done to ostensibly. That was not done to frighten the victims. They don't. He didn't use it to that end. And Brian Hartnell said he couldn't even figure out what it was about. And so, when he confessed, of course, on the phone afterward, he believed he had killed both of them. So, he wore it for himself. This was not to leave
Right.
He wore the strange hood. That's being anachronistic. He thought he murdered them both. And so he wore this for himself. It obviously meant an awful lot to him.
Right. That's a very interesting point, that he had no intention of leaving any survivors. So it's like, it wasn't like he wore the costume so people would see. So what did I get wrong there on my unpacking? That he didn't set out to frame Arthur Lee Allen. He just emulated it, and then when the heat came on later, he was like, "Okay, I'm gonna sort of."
When it got too close, he started to cast the suspicion there, and that's when Allen looked into his past and started getting around that Zodiac had been at Atascadero, and obviously nothing went anywhere after that.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of inferences, and all this inference, of course, as I said in the beginning, that Zodiac was downwind of Lee Allen. Inference that he was setting him up intentionally, and then that Allen knew there were ears about him that could get the message back to him that I know you were at Atascadero, I know who you are. And again, it comes back to the question, why didn't Lee Allen turn him in and just be done with it? See how much dirt is on Lee Allen.
Okay. So what kind of dirt is on Lee Allen? That he's like we all know he's kind of like a pervert or something like that, right? So I mean, that's
a child molester. He was very much into other things. He was ostensibly very pro the New Left. Had a lot of bomb equipment in his basement. Arsenal of guns at one point when they served papers on him in 1981. So the reader is going to have to go through this and try and, I put all the dots there, but, they're going to have to draw some strings themselves.
Yeah.
Because some things have to be filled in that way. And I'm not, it's a lot better for the reader and more enjoyable that they can draw their own conclusions with some of this. So when you start filling in the dots, that more and more will come forward, more and more strings will be drawn, and this will only begin more information coming forward.
Right. Where did you learn that Arthur Lee Allen got this letter from Gary that he knew from a Tuscadero or whatever?
Phil and Joan Tucker, who knew him, told the police about it, and then he showed Joan Tucker, according to the police report by Mullinax, who was the Vallejo detective. There's no reason given as to why Lee Allen showed it, but I would suspect it's because Joan Tucker was a psychology student and she expressed an interest well, she actually said that in mentally disturbed people and what they write. And Alan showed her this letter that an Atascadero inmate had written him. Now, there's no motive given as to why Lee Allen was curious. I suspect he wanted her to give a judgment eventually. Is this guy killer material? This is the early on in February 1970 when he's, this is a couple months after that letter appears, asked the Vallejo cop about my electric gun sight, which could only mean Lee Allen shooting his mouth off. Because Phil Tucker had said he had heard about that, the electric gun sight, and Ted Kidder was another one at the Vallejo Recreation. There's more people. Alan was a very convivial man.
Okay.
I know.
Go ahead.
I know Graysmith tried to portray him as this withdrawn man in his basement and, that kind of stuff. But Lee Allen was actually very, very personable. And he was very charming, and he would hit up people, talk to them, make friends. A real easy, private pilot's license. He went and did a lot of stuff. He was actually quite in the newspapers when he was young in the 1950s. He was the image of the American boy next door because he got all these awards for diving and swimming, and his pictures often there. So he knew a lot of people quite, Sandy Panzarella became quite affluent. And he traveled in a broad spectrum. A lot of ex-cons were in his friends. He associated with a wide spectrum.
And so when you say downwind, just to be clear, you're sort of saying sort of like a friend of a friend sort of thing. He was not necessarily that he was buddies with Lee Allen, but they were either acquaintances or sort of like he was friends with someone who's friends with Lee Allen. That's how he heard about ALA's fantasies, if you will. He
was acquainted with him from Atascadero in 1962, and they had all the same hobbies and fishing, as I say, hunting, race car driving, all that stuff. So mechanics, they were both mechanics, and they would have had contact much later after he got out in 66.
Interesting.
And so, I don't think Ellen ever told him directly, I've got this wonderful story like he did with Don Chaney, but he was within the ripples from Ellen and heard.
Yeah.
And so there's someone, that's why I say it's a short step from a conspiracy of silence to a conspiracy of actors, because someone in between Ellen and the Zodiac also kept quiet.
Right. So, so someone in between should have made that.
That's why I hesitate to say names, because there could be, two actors involved. And when I say one name, it might be implying I think he is the sole Zodiac. And I will only name one definitely, but I give the other names, around and, show the evidence. Like I did with you, there's not just the blonde descriptions, then in between, sandwich in between, this big guy with dark brown hair, and then blonde, shorter guy, crew cut in San Francisco again. There are two different confession calls. Nancy Slover said the caller in Vallejo after the Blue Rock Springs attack had a mature voice. Now that usually means in the 30s, mid-30s. What it meant to her, I don't know. It's subject to interpretation. Zodiac calls after Lake Berryessa, where he's starkly different described than in Vallejo. Officer Dave Slate takes the call, and he says this guy's in his young 20s, early 20s. And by voice concept, Brian Hartnell said the guy was young. So we have a mature voice and a young voice, but of course, Nancy Slover's is subject to interpretation. We have an accurate description of the guy's car. The co-eds describe the guy's car at Lake Berryessa. It's easily identifiable as a 1966 or later Chevy Malibu, sky blue in color. They said the taillights were no longer round. They were long rectangular. 1965 was the last year it had round lights. It went to long rectangular lights in 66. So this is a 66 or 67, 68 sky blue Chevy Malibu. It's not a car a young guy would be driving, which it isn't. This is a parent's car. Now, behind Brian Hartnell's Carmen Gia, there were a set of tire tracks, ostensibly those of the man who lettered the car.
Yeah.
Zodiac's writing. They're measured accurately. The span between the tires. One was a retread. It had a line down the center, so it's clear it was a retread. So this is an older jalopy. The span between the tires could not possibly be those of a late model Chevy Malibu, which had a much wider span, and it would have had new tires that were much wider. These tires on the jalopy were like 5 inches, 5.5 inches. Stock tires for a Chevy Malibu would have been 7.5 inches.
Yeah.
So here, the guy may have worn wigs. He may have changed his hair color, all these different sites, but he's not driving two different cars. He's not switching cars. And so the guy that the co-eds describe in the Malibu sounds very much like the one, that Hartnell is describing, with the brown lock of hair down in the eyelet, and heavy guy, 220, 30 pounds, about 6 foot. So that's a pretty heavy guy. But then the jalopy, is the jalopy a coincidence, or are there two guys? And one's covering for him when he's, quarter of a mile from the road. The other one remains behind. Which one is doing the writing?
Oh, that's an interesting.
So the writing had to be done here. It had to be, the proof had to be here that this guy is not just some crank on paper, that he's at the crime scene as well.
Yeah.
So if there was one doing the killing and one doing the writing, both had to be at Lake Berryessa. And coincidentally, that's where we have evidence of two cars.
Interesting. All right.
So all this is something for the reader to go over. It is not proof. That's why I don't use it as proof, but it has to be discussed.
Yeah.
Potential that there was more than one person in this very elaborate live action role play that involved needless confession calls, that involved needless letter writing for years, that involved needless cryptograms. There's more than one motive here.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way.
It just cannot be a pent-up sex killer, and it cannot be someone who simply was, thrilled by Lee Allen's story that he decides to live action role play it alone for that purpose.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly it's a baffling case. I mean, I've heard a lot of various interesting theories on it. I will have to definitely dig into the book to sort of get the full fleshed out version of your theory. Is there anything in there that sort of like really surprised you as you were doing this research, where you were like, oh, wow, this, I have to pivot sort of my thinking on all this?
Yes, several times. I was firmly convinced that there was only one man, and officially I still have to say there was. But when I uncovered how, did more of the history work, looked into how they talked back then, how watched the documentaries and read the books, on the drug culture and the militant left and how they talked, and saw how much that contemporary education, the militant youth, was involved in Zodiac's whole language.
Yeah.
The two different distinct descriptions of discovering that the SFPD sketch is really quite worthless as far as I'm concerned. There were many surprises. Then finding out, that how to explain, I thought he was just doodling when that in the center of the page, nothing else, just that statement, that I quoted, "To prove I am the Zodiac, ask the Vallejo cop." That's telling him to go talk to John Lynch, basically. Yeah. And to find out that's really, it's only after I encountered the connection.
Yeah.
Between, the man that Lee Allen feared and suspected, that I really saw that it fits, that this is an accusation against Lee Allen.
Interesting. Now,
what reason why he took that risk, why he needed to try and frame Lee Allen, it's pointless from what we know, but obviously there might have been a little more contact between someone, some mutual between them both, and there was a need to get the heat off of him.
Yeah. Well, Well, you earlier said that he wasn't on the radar of the cops, though. So, I mean, what do you mean get the heat?
Well, he didn't know that at the time.
Okay,
There was a lot of people in the East Bay who certainly knew who he was. He was in Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
He should not. He could probably prove he was in Santa Barbara because he was supposed to be on a tight probation leash, but he was such a model subject that by 1970, his then probation officer says that his probation should end early.
Right. Okay.
So he wasn't really on a leash anymore by 1969. He was driving all over for car repossession, for continuing his education, for field trips, for fishing, complete, fishing around the Bay Area is everywhere.
Yeah.
That's and then, the reader will see another reason why he's in the East Bay with the contacts there, that, a few guys that had criminal records, and he's getting connected with them. And they're within the hunting crowd. They're within the mechanics, gas station crowd, like Lee Allen. There was contact with an English family. Zodiac was using British English on occasion. He wasn't anything like that, but it's just part of his disinformation.
Right.
And then the big thing, which is going to sound corny to people, but I don't mind, I actually removed the paragraph in my book where I said I didn't mention it earlier because it would sound stupid, but I recognize Zodiac's pants. And that was one of the leading. Well, why did I have to have pants like Lou Costello in the early 80s? Well, we don't have to go into that. But in the early 80s, they were still being made. They are wool pants. They were 4 colors made.
Yeah.
Black that Zodiac wore, the rust brown that Zodiac wore, the olive drab that I had in the 1980s, and then the khaki. And they were in sportsman's store. They were worn by fishermen went out fishing or hunting in the foothills. And they were the 1940s and 50s pleated cuffed pants. And they were still being made, they're completely unfashionable for 1969 or 1981. But it was our family gardener who set me on this. I needed pants like Lou Costello, like Abbott and Costello wore. I was a kid and I needed these pants for a reason. And so Mr. Hassler told my mom that you go to the sporting stores and they're advertised in, sportsman's magazines. And these are worn by gardeners and
serial killers,
sportsmen. And Zodiac was wearing a disguise, like he said. He was wearing his windbreaker, and he was wearing pants that were completely out of fashion, and probably most people would not recognize them as pants that a fisherman or a gardener would still be wearing.
Wow! All right,
and that really led me to root around into the East Bay sportsman. And so when I found the court records, when I found all this about the man at Atascadero, and that he was an avid sportsman as well, as aside from stock car racing and everything, and choking women and using a knife at on parking dates. That's how he got.
It all came together. Yeah,
that's how he got sent over to Atascadero. And he was a LARPer. He was a live action role player. He starts when he's young in 1959. He's choking his girlfriend. And then she breaks up with him. He's cruising around. He gets more girlfriends. He takes them to drive-ins. He's a big movie guy. He's a theatric guy. And he starts choking them too. He proposes to one after his girlfriend threw him over, and she said no. And so he choked her and then tried to snuff her with the pillow. And that's what basically got him, arrested.
Yeah.
And the Santa Barbara police then went back and did an investigation and turned up more women that he was choking, just was massaging one's back because she was sore. And he just started choking her, and she's trying to scratch him to let go. And one, he choked so much that the necklace she was wearing cut into her and was bleeding. They had, marks on them for 3 weeks, finger marks on their neck. And so finally, this gets him put into, before court psychiatrist because he has to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. And he was perfectly sane, the shrink said, but, he had to go to Atascadero State Hospital
Which is where he meets Arthur Lee Allen.
in 1962. He's there, off and on for 5 years between
Right.
Chino Men's Colony and Atascadero. This guy had a long record in it, and I don't need a ticket stub from him to know that he had seen Otto Preminger's classic Anatomy of a Murder, which came out in 1959. He was taking all these girls to drive-ins all the time, and that becomes his excuse in court. That became his excuse to the probation officer, to the shrinks initially, that he blacked out when all this happened. He
Okay,
cannot
let's
account-
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so I just want to fast forward a little bit. So, okay, so I presume you trace this dude's life after the crimes, right? So he stops killing after Stein. He's achieved his goal of creating terror, but this terror doesn't last forever. I mean, people are still freaked out by Zodiac, but it's not like people get on with their lives when the thing kind of settles down. What becomes of this guy post Stein, post Zodiac zenith, if you will? He doesn't.
He goes off radar, and he lives the life of a quiet insurance salesman. So he's on his own and doesn't have to work for someone who might look into his record. It's called recidivism. Tascadero warned people that that's a big fear, that they know you were at the state madhouse and it can affect your employment. But I traced his life before. This was all going on 1959. This is what got him into Atascadero.
Right. That's what you were just talking about. Yeah.
He would be parking and choking. And then he went to a Hollywood hypnotherapist to get insights into why he's parking and choking. And
How do you know this? How do you?
I got all the records. I got the names and everything.
Oh wow. Okay. From the institution or something?
From the court. This all had to go to court. All of it was submitted by the court.
Oh wow. Okay.
Into the records, and they found it for me. And so he, the hypnotherapist told him, this is beyond hypnotherapy. You need a psychiatrist.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
A Hollywood one. Yeah. And then, he says he blacks out. He didn't do this with these 4 girls. He blacks out and he can't remember doing it. And he tries to build up being crazy to the shrinks so he can just have outpatient therapy. But they say he's sane, and then he backtracks and says he didn't black out. Well, in the movie with Ben Gazzara's character, if you know Anatomy of a Murder, he claims that, he blacked out when he committed the crime. That he was so mad this man supposedly raped his wife, Lee Remick, that he goes and he kills him, but he can't remember it. It's labeled an irresistible impulse in the movie.
Yeah. And
this then becomes his defense in the real life in court. And you look at his theatric background in North Hollywood and so forth, and you see that you can see why he would wear a hood, why he would engage in live action role playing. He's inspired by movies already in 1959.
Right. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so now the book just came out, literally a couple days ago, and I think you're having a little trouble with Amazon or some shit. So
Amazon is still listing it as not available. Right. It is available, not with them. There's a lot of pre-orders, but Thrift Books is shipping. They have it online, and then Friday, Barnes and Noble says it will be out.
But I know you probably don't really care too much, but have you seen any reaction again from the Zodiac community? Because those folks are fastidious and pretty intense with their research. You're dropping a new person of interest on this group of real dedicated researchers. Has there been any reaction yet from that community to your suspect?
No one's read the book. It's just out. It's just shipping from the warehouses.
All right.
And hopefully, I don't know who they all are, but hopefully they simply ignore me or try and lambaste the book as much as they can, because I know what I've done. I know what will eventually come out. And so it would be the better for me if they completely deride the book.
Well, what do you mean by what will eventually come out?
Well, eventually, I am that certain that I have the principal actor in here, and that it does ripple out to within the community of people that I mentioned.
Yeah.
And so they can lambaste me. They can do whatever. I will actually take great relief at that because I saw what happened. I was so involved in the EAR, the East Area Rapist investigation case, to where, I was maybe getting stuff I should not have been getting, but I was, my information was being triaged by two jurisdictions, district attorney's office and a sheriff's office. And when D'Angelo was outed, everybody was stunned. The supervisor in Orange County told me, don't feel bad. He was on no one's radar. But then I saw what people were doing to Paul Holes, who, did the DNA testing. He was in Concord. And then, it comes out that, so forth and so on was also working on this guy, so forth. Knew it. It's kind of like, this childish thing. Oh, I knew it was him all along.
Right,
no,
right.
He was on no one's radar.
Right, right. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to just stop you there for a moment here. Let's pivot, if you don't mind. I feel like we've covered HorrorScope here. I really want to get into ear-ons with you because the last time you were on Binnall of America 8 years ago, that was the last time we talked. And then we retired the show for our hiatus in 2018. And then Gian, literally about 2-3 days after we taped the last episode of Binnall of America, and I sailed off into the sunset, they arrested Joseph D'Angelo as ear-ons. And it was like, oh, damn, dude. Like, I want to talk to Gian Quasar, but I just retired. This is crazy. So I've been waiting to have this conversation with you for 8 years. So at first, I want to start on this. What was your reaction when they made the arrest? And for folks who are we're pivoting here now to the East Area Rapist, original Night Stalker, or Golden State Killer. I don't care for that name, but that's what a lot of people know him as. Joseph D'Angelo, arrested in 2018. We had Gian on with Michelle Cruz, one of the sister of one of the victims, the last victim that we know of Joseph D'Angelo. So to start this conversation I've wanted to have for you for a while, what was your reaction? Were you excited, thrilled, irritated because you thought you might have been able to break the case yourself? What were you thinking when you heard they made an arrest?
I would never believe a composite sketch again.
All right.
That man he was never seen at, I have a whole page on the witnesses composites of some young punk in the neighborhood and what they look like. This is what was standard being released, and more were still scheduled to be released. And I was trying to analyze between them to figure out what this guy looked like. And I had been told behind the scenes in confidence by the DA's office that the DNA did prove he had hazel eyes. And so then I had to look, and that was then guided me in my investigation thereafter. Fortunately, one of my prime suspects had hazel eyes. I was, shocked that how biased the information was from witnesses, that the police believed that this was just some young sicko punk out there, because that's what they deferred to when witnesses, did the composites. It's always some young punk with long hair.
Yeah.
And not this cop with a policeman's haircut. What I did take some pride in, I couldn't share too much. I didn't want to make it sound like I was patting myself on the back, but my analysis, which was public at the time from my prime guy, when I had the page on my prime suspect, for all the information to me said that Zodiac, that EAR did not live in the East area then, but he was coming back to a place he knew, and that he lived up in Placerville, up Highway 50. Well, it turns out D'Angelo grew up in Rancho Cordova, and he lived up in Auburn, which is the highway that runs parallel to 50 up into the foothills. So I just had the wrong highway, but my analysis was at least correct, that he was coming from even further east. And so, he would not be suspected. He was not a drag in the local area.
Right.
But I don't think, it was Poole was his name, Larry Poole in Orange County, the detective. He said, I don't think this guy ever slept. Because, he's in the newspaper in Auburn for some kind of game. And then that night he's, raping someone in Concord
Right.
area. So that's quite a long drive. And this guy, just was, again, the unsuspected because he wasn't nearby and he would do a lot of driving.
Now, I've heard.
Remember the DNA. I've not discussed it ever since I simply went off radar with the case because I was burned out on it.
I bet.
And I was being maligned by people who followed. What's her name? She's dead now. McNamara.
Yeah.
Because she was giving out incorrect information that she said was DNA that was official. And, but I had enough of, people coming to me demanding that I give them the sheriff's or the FBI's, email so they could turn this person in. And I knew they had already tried that and didn't go anywhere because they were nuts. And I didn't want to disturb. I, had the direct email of the FBI agent in charge, Mark Knutson. And just there was so much I was glad to leave it and not discuss it anymore.
Yeah.
But, the DNA that got D'Angelo is from the murders down south.
Right.
There was no DNA saved in Sacramento. And I don't know if it was all saved in Concord. Some was, I think. What was saved in Visalia over the Visalia ransacker, I don't even remember anymore. But D'Angelo, to save his life, in his plea bargain, said he'd confessed to everything. And as a result, there was no trial.
Right.
They were not submitted to the court. It all did not come out. And there is a huge question in my mind, and I think in a few others, did he really do it all? Did he do all the Visalia ransacker crimes? Did he do all the Sacramento rapes, or an awful lot in Sacramento? And on, one of the very vocal victims said distinctly the rapist's eyes were blue. And the kid said the kid was very distinct. The kid of the victim, I think on another occasion, the eyes were blue. And on another occasion, they were hazel by another victim.
Right. Well, it's a couple
on occasion, the guy's hairy. Then on occasion, the guy's not hairy. On occasion, the guy has stubble on his legs, like he shaves his legs. Occasion, he's got very full curly hair. There's different height. He's normal male anatomy. He's very small male anatomy. It's hard to say. There should have been a trial, more came out, but of course, nothing was prosecutable in Sacramento.
Right.
Outside of statute of limitations. But I'm just not really sure if he did everything he confessed to. He did the murders because the DNA was there. And that's why they got him. But if he did all the rapes in Sacramento, there was a lot that Ken Clark, the detective, went back and did a lot on the Cordova cat, that cat burglar. He did a lot of work on that, trying to find a car that this guy supposedly wore. There was a lot of composites that just could not be explained by D'Angelo, and these could not be explained by some punk in the neighborhood either. So the whole Cordova cat burglar stuff kind of got forgotten.
Yeah.
And, he has to start somewhere. That's why they say cat burglars end up being rapists and all that, because you have to be in the house for it. But the burglars, they rob people in the house intentionally.
Yeah, well,
the basic burglar waits till the house is empty, but cat burglars go in while you're still there. That's why they're called cat burglars.
All right. Well, my understanding is that, they connected the rapes to the murders through the DNA. That's why he became ear-ons, right? That was the breakthrough in the thing, because they weren't. Yeah. They realized that this was the same guy who was doing the rapes, had gone down and done the murders. That's how he became ear-ons. Eastern Rapist Flash. One original Night Stalker. My question, which you kind of already answered, is do you think, because as you mentioned, the rapes, the statute of limitation on the rapes had already passed, so they couldn't even have charged him for those. I think they could have charged him and did in some instances with kidnapping related to some of those cases, and of course all of the murders. And then he pled guilty to like everything, and they just wiped it all out. So I guess my question again, which I think you kind of already answered, is do you think like the authorities were like, look, we just want this done? Not unlike you having it once it was over. They were like, look, we don't want to deal with this anymore. So we're going to just let this guy take the fall for everything under one big umbrella and call it a day and not try to sort of really dig any deeper and see if he had any.
I think they would have to, because district attorney's offices, I think in terms of simplifying things, their accusation's only going to be one sentence, everything. They want to keep things simple, so there's no problem winning. If he could only have been prosecuted for the murders in real life, the kidnapping was very weak by law. If, if a guy tackles a woman in a parking lot and drags her into a public bathroom, they can get him for kidnapping because he's taking her away to conceal her to commit the rape. But if you're taking someone from their bedroom to their living room in their own house, that would have been very sketchy that they could have gotten him for kidnapping. Because you're really not ensconcing her somewhere to hide her from, to conceal the act. You're just
I wasn't sure. Yeah, I thought maybe it was like the when he sort of trapped the husbands or boyfriends with the dishes. I wonder if that fell under. I didn't look too deeply into the charges, so I just don't think
that they could have
that
done
was kidnapping. I don't know.
So if they believe there was another Visalia ransacker who is described in very different terms than D'Angelo, one of the detectives, Richard, what was his name now? He wrote the book.
I don't know.
Anyway, he said he could make a case for two guys were involved. And
I've heard the theory. I mean, I've heard the theory, so it's certainly not out of the question. It is just very interesting. It's from my perspective, having followed the case through you and then sort of the aftermath. Yeah, it was very interesting to see. First of all, I mean, it's getting better now with DNA and everything, but you very rarely see these sort of iconic cases solved. So it was like, holy shit, they actually solved one of these iconic cases. And it was just very interesting to see sort of that you really don't get almost any of the answers you really want when the case is solved. Like he didn't say anything.
Tried. See, that's
right. And he didn't say anything.
It would have come out. But I still have a copy of that, where it says he will plead guilty for the plea bargain. He'll plead guilty to everything. So if a trial had been done, a lot more would have come out. But I think a lot of questions also for things that could not be prosecuted, like did he do all the rapes? Was he the Visalia ransacker as well? I think it was stuff that they could never pursue anyway. Once he was convicted for the murders, why go investigate the rapes again? Because they're not even prosecutable anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
I devote manpower to that. No department could afford to do that. The Sacramento detectives are doing it on their own time.
I guess what I mean is that you don't even get any of the answers to sort of the questions that, like the note that he left behind, like the lament or whatever, the poem that they say that he wrote. We don't even know if that even came from the guy or what, and we'll never know. And it's like that's just there's a sort of the sleuthing runs up against a wall where it's like the case is over. They caught this guy, and it's like he never, unless he ever comes out and talks about what motivated him or what went on in his head throughout all this, we'll never really kind of know the full story of Joseph D'Angelo and what, how he was doing all this, how he was managing to pull all this off without anyone finding out. And like what, I'm sure, you've looked at all these cases. There are all these sort of little weird details where it's like, okay, why did this happen at this point? And why did that happen? Like, we'll never know the answers to those questions, even though the case is ostensibly solved, right?
The murders are solved and a large number of the rapes, I'm sure. But, who really was the Cordova cat? Was there another rapist involved? The detective in charge of the case, Richard, forget his name yet again. He said, it was not an entirely unique MO. There were other rapists who did this type of, home invasion, a terrifying type of thing. So it would have been better if the trial had brought out a lot of details. But then I don't know how much of this could have been heard in court that would have been stopped by the attorneys because it's not prosecutable.
Right. Yeah.
The rape,
Yeah.
regardless of what news media built up and attempts by the district attorney's office to consider some of these kidnappings, so they're still within. A lot of this could not simply be tried in court, be used as evidence. And since he, wasn't, I guess he's never been interviewed, has he? Afterward, just
No,
say,
he hasn't said.
has any journalist said, "Can you confess? Did you do it all?"
No, he's not talking. He's not talking. It's sort of it's very similar to the Idaho case where the guy pled out, took the life sentence and to spare himself the death penalty, but nobody has any understanding sort of what was in this guy's mind. Not like you can really ever really know, because these people are unhinged, twisted, sick individuals. So you can't really trust what they're thinking. But I think a lot of people were spoiled by the BTK case, where he just went up there and went through his whole spiel about all the different things and kind of answered every little weird question related to the case. I think everybody always kind of wants that, but that is a real rarity in a sense, because Joseph D'Angelo, he's not talking. He'll probably die in prison, and we'll never really know. Why'd you stop killing? Did you kill anybody else? Did you whatever? Like, we'll never. How'd you find the time? How'd you pull it off? Why did you start killing? And how'd you go from raping to killing? We'll never know these answers to these questions. It's really it's just a strange sort of phenomenon, if you will, related to these sort of crimes.
It is, considering how much media attention there was that this could just be, halted the way it was because he would confess.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. You don't really see any new information that's come out. I think the only thing I really heard was like a few years ago that some of his interrogation was one of the reporters for the LA Times had heard some of the interrogation, and he sort of tried to, say like, "Oh, I pushed it down," but it was super vague, and that was like all he said. It was like, "Oh, geez," But it's the kind of thing. It's like you really do kind of want to know. All right, dude, what the fuck were you thinking? Like, why did you, what could have possibly been going on in your head to drive you to such an insane, crime? It's a crime.
Such a pace that he carried off. Northern California down to Stockton, Vesco, the Bay Area, and some, I suppose, in Visalia. I just don't think he was what we would call the Visalia ransacker, because that guy was supposed to be blonde and kind of doofy. And
well, did the resolution of the case sort of? You said earlier you wouldn't necessarily trust sketches.
No, I don't.
Did sort of the resolution of this case teach you anything about, the Zodiac research you were doing and any other cases in the future where you're like, okay, now that we know how this all kind of, now that we have found the missing puzzle piece, which is the guy, did you kind of like look back at what you were doing and go, oh, okay, maybe if I had looked at it this way or that way, I would have been able to sort of find him in your mind, like you think you have found the Zodiac killer?
I would have, it reaffirmed for me that they both came from afar. But I was looking at the map all the time, plotting everything. And I knew, I'd even considered there was only a couple attacks up off Highway 80. Like, that was too far. I even said in my analysis, like, that's too far for the guy. That reinforces that it's up Highway 50. He comes down from Placerville, and he's hitting all around Citrus Heights and Rancho Cordova and a couple in Orangevale. But, there's just only a couple strikes up off Highway 80.
Yeah.
And that was the reverse of what it should. In fact, he was hiding where he was coming from by striking very little, because he came down from Auburn down Highway 80 into the east area rather than coming down from Placerville and Highway 50.
Yeah.
So it was intentional. He struck only a couple to make it look like that was too far for him. And in fact, that's the area he bypassed to go to all of his much more frequent areas.
Well, I think one takeaway from the case is, it's interesting. I mean, maybe people did look at it. You were talking about how, no one had mentioned Joseph D'Angelo. He was on no one's list. It was on it had shown up nowhere. And there was no one's prime suspect or a suspect, period. But it is interesting that if, hindsight being 2020, if they had researchers, authorities, whatever, had looked at, police officers who had left the force, who were from the area, maybe that would have been the trigger to lead to him, because he was arrested for shoplifting and had to quit being a cop. And it was like, maybe that would have pinged on someone's radar. Oh, that's a weird situation. That guy got arrested. He's a cop who got arrested for shoplifting and he had to quit. And
it was dog repellent that he was taking.
Right. And it's like, but no one because it was such a small crime. It was such a minor thing that it never got picked up by anybody. But if in the course of your research into this, you had stumbled upon this, you went through the roster of police officers in, I think it was Exeter or one town, wherever he was, that he was the cop, and seeing that he had to quit because he got arrested for shoplifting, maybe that would have pinged you onto the thing. That was the only.
I don't know, because back then I still believed in all these sketches. There were so many, and he simply didn't look like anything.
Right.
This looked like a punk. Somebody even said they could see the hair underneath. Sarah Salon could see it under the masks, brim. And I just, he didn't look like any of the sketches.
Right. Well, the other part of it too is even if you like stumbled upon this guy, Joseph D'Angelo, in the process of your research before they arrested him, like, from what we know, we have seen no evidence to tie him to the Earons case beyond the DNA, because it never went to trial. So it's like you, Gian, do not have that fucking DNA. So there was no way you could have been like, okay, I know it's this Joseph D'Angelo guy. It's like, because I have seen no case against this guy beyond the DNA. Well, I think he did it, believe me, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, I
could only refine my investigation of him if he resembled the sketches, because then that would make me curious. He did look like one of the sketches in the Majora double murder. But there was also another sketch where the guy was described as having curly hair, standing about at cross streets, and EAR in one of his strikes in Davis was said to have a curly hair and be very hairy. And that may have been another guy. That may be a mistake that's attributed to him.
Yeah.
But really, that's the only sketch that looked like him, was the Majora double murder, where this person was suspected and he had a cop's haircut.
Well, wasn't there one sketch where he had like a mustache and there's a picture of him, like you mentioned, the one at the ball game where he had the mustache? That one kind of looked a little like him.
There was a picture of him where he had a mustache as a police officer.
Right. And there was a sketch with the guy who had the kind of like that little wispy kind of looking mustache too, right?
Yes. That was one of two sketches.
Yeah.
Someone seen before. And then one of the guys there who saw, you have to be careful about some witnesses. He identified, Carl identified this picture of this young guy as the one that jumped the fence and stood in front of him. I said, well, that seems pretty authoritative. This is the teenager, Carl Knoll, who, Knolf or whatever was the name. The name is public, so I can say it. But after the crime, the killer jumped the fence and ran a couple houses, then stopped dead. And when he saw Carl standing there on his front lawn, and then he turned around and ran away, and Carl identified on camera for the TV, for everybody, this sketcher, and this is the guy I saw.
Yeah.
And I thought that was real authoritative. And then Ken Clark, who was the detective in Sacramento, talked to me and said, it's worthless. Carl didn't even see him with his face. He had a mask on.
Well, there you go. Yeah. So
you have to take the amount of data, not just one. You have to take the overall context, which is what I've learned to do when I was refining everything. But the Zodiac case is to take a very wide swath of data and not accept that he was close by. I believed he was either from Sacramento, one of them maybe, And then Santa Barbara kind of surprised me, but it made perfect sense.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. Like I said, I think that it offers someone like you an opportunity to sort of look at what you were doing when you were researching the case and being like, okay, maybe I was too focused, like you said, on the sketches. Maybe I should have, looked at police rosters or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it is
Look at
sort
the
of,
overall pattern. I actually forsake one of my guys has very disturbing printing. I was able to get his military records and see his printing. And I actually have him, but he's not the prime actor. He's not the one I will name. And I took overall context and all the clues and evidence between, Lee Allen's factor as far more authoritative even than writing, because I examined enough of the Zodiac's writing to know he was either an ambidexter or he was very good at hiding his writing, because it is not just his normal writing. You can see where he's writing backward and forward, and sometimes even upside down. You can see this from the point of where the pen touches the paper, and it is that of an ambidexter, and it's not Lee Allen's writing. I have Lee Allen's writing.
well, HorrorScope, the Zodiac Exposed, that's the book. Folks can get it over on Amazon. Were you, just one last Earhart question? Were you like,
Get it anywhere? Actually, it'll be out.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm just
Bookstores can order it. Barnes and Noble, Thrift Books, whoever carries it. There's a bookstore in Singapore that's already advertising it.
Oh, there you go, Singapore, nice. When the Earhart's case broke, you were surprised, but was there a sense of sort of disappointment? I kind of got. I mean, people were elated that the guy was captured, and I think a lot of people in that community wouldn't necessarily say it. They won't say it out loud, but I believe, because I followed other cases like this, it happens. There's a sense of disappointment because the chase is over. The hunt is over for this guy. Was there any sort of sense of that, or were you kind of like, oh, good, I can leave this insane madman behind?
There's both. You build this guy up. I said he's the real life Michael Myers. So as you build him up into all of them, into this real evil villain like the Phantom of the Opera, where at the end you remove the mask and you see the hideous form, man worthy of all the evil he's done. And in real life, it turns out to be, some sausage chewing wino or some cheap punk.
Right.
And so it's kind of disappointing to see, the face of evil is often very familiar, and it's not this grotesque, hideous phantom. So that's always kind of disappointing that it's not the, it's St. George and the Dragon. It's not St. George and the Salamander.
Yeah, exactly.
You want evil to be real evil. If you're going to hunt him, you want this creep to be something worthy taking down. But it's really not that way.
Yeah, it's unsettling in a way because it's.
But I was certainly glad it was over. I kept my mouth shut afterward. I didn't start taking down my blog. What's on my website is there. I had a blog at that time because I was keeping people up to date with information. I was being bogged down by it. My website was getting thousands of hits just in that section.
Yeah, you were deep.
The website is far more, carefully written than my blog was, extemporaneous. That's something you write like a little morning diary. But I started taking all that down and left only the website up because I'm not really sure if there was more than one person, but eventually it all has to come down.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like I said, you were deep into it. I expected that you were going to be writing a book or putting out a book about it, and then all of a sudden the case was solved. So it was like, oh wow, shit. So yeah, it's an interesting turn of events. So we'll see what happens here with the Zodiac Killer. Now, before I let you go, we're not going to get into it now, but give me like a thumbnail because we're gonna get you back on the show. We'll talk about it later. In the interim, since the last talk to you in 2017, you did come out with another book, which you had teased, I think, when you were on the show before. And that was Then Came the Dawn, The Search for Amelia Earhart, Then and Now. So just give me sort of a thumbnail. Give us a teaser here as we wrap up the show. you know, and I actually have another question for you. So don't stop listening, folks. We got a little bit more I want to ask Gian, but give me a thumbnail, a teaser.
I'm not sure if I remember what I wrote.
All right. Well,
No, I bring up an awful lot of what was motivating people behind the scenes. You know, George Putnam actually was going to psychics and everything, and some of the information he sent out for the Coast Guard to go look was being sent to him by psychics. And that was never, that's in naval paperwork, these coordinates that they're searching. George Putnam says, will you please search this area? And I was the one to find out that he was actually consulting psychics, and that I did come up with a lot of information that did point that she had the fuel to get to the Gilbert Islands after missing Howland. She could have gotten, there was some stuff that came up, that information indicating she ditched on a reef somewhere. They went looking for it. I don't think that I was the first one to report that the English got involved, and they actually sent governor of the Gilbert Islands sent a captain and his steamer to go out and look to see if the wreckage was on a certain sandbar somewhere in the Gilbert Islands, because of reports that they were getting, and it coincided. These were tangible reports that did coincide with some of the stuff that George Putnam was getting from psychics.
Yeah.
And that's what inspired all this stuff to do with Cordell Hull and everything going to London. There was a big to-do about that.
All right. Well, like I said, we just wanted a teaser for that because we've already gone way over what we had planned on. Two notes here. Is there any more tragic figure, and I say this tongue-in-cheek in a sense, in the world of unsolved mysteries than poor Fred Noonan? No one talks about Fred Noonan. No one ever mentions that he vanished alongside Amelia. It's an Amelia Earhart disappearance. It's like, what about Fred Noonan, man? He vanished too. Very sad fate for Fred Noonan. Disappeared twice. The other thing I want to ask you about, you're a California guy. You're big into the California mysteries. Have you ever looked at the Yuba County 5 case?
Is that up at Grass Valley?
It's in Yuba.
Yuba City is around there.
I'm not a California guy, so.
Was that Cabin 28?
No, it's about the 5 guys who went went missing, or initially went missing in the mountains in Yuba County, and then they found their bodies. And all right, so you haven't looked at it essentially.
They were challenged. They were challenged.
Yes.
5 challenged.
Yes,
yes. The case. They even made a movie about that, didn't they?
I'm not sure about that. It's very under. They did make a Netflix documentary, a brief one, like an hour-long show, a part of a larger series. But it's growing in popularity now, for lack of a better term. Interest is growing in the case.
Are they saying it's murder or?
Well, there's many theories. It's like it's becoming a classic unsolved mystery. In that there are various theories and various avenues to go down. It's the kind of thing, honestly, that the reason why I asked you is A, to maybe inspire you to look into it, and B, to get your thoughts if you had looked into it, because it's a Gian Quasar case if I've ever heard of one. It's rich with unique and unusual details and stuff that's sort of buried in official reports, and the kind of thing that I think that you would really absorb yourself in. So maybe take a look at it if you get the chance. And that sort of segues into the wrap-up question is, what's next for you? I know you just put out HorrorScope, the Zodiac Exposed. This has been a long process for you to get this book out, but I have a feeling maybe you're cooking up something, or you're getting the ingredients ready for something else. I mean, what are you working on for in the future?
Retirement. I would suspect this is my last book.
Oh, no. All right. Okay. All right. Well, maybe I inspired you to look into do a Yuba County 5 book, dude. You should definitely look at it.
I was looking into a lot of the gay murders of San Francisco, but that is just too, I don't think people are interested. It's 50 years ago now. Stuff that was once associated with the Doodler, and I don't even believe the Doodler existed. But I uncovered 60 murders.
Wow.
Of gay men, and like a Jack the Ripper killing guys. Very gross murders.
Yeah.
But all in the 1970s to early 80s. But 60 of them. And There's a couple of serials that must have been involved in that. They went back and forth from New York and Seattle and all the places, I think. But it's just too involved. I don't think people are interested. And it costs $50 a pop to get each coroner's report.
Oh boy. Well, for 60, yeah, you're looking at it's quite a that's like $3,000. Yeah, that's crazy. All right. Well, I selfishly I hope that this is not your last book. And like I said, I would love it if you looked into the Yuba County 5 case, because you bring a really unique perspective and research methodology there to these cases and these unsolved mysteries that I think it would really benefit from having you look at it. But you have a life. I'm just an idea man. I can only float ideas. But if this is your last book, I want to commend you for everything you've done over the years. As I said, you were on the show 17 years ago, and you've done Bermuda Triangle, Jack the Ripper, Bigfoot, Earons, Amelia Earhart, Zodiac Killer. Yeah, I lumped all that under Bermuda Triangle, but yeah. But you've been a prolific researcher on all these cases, man, and I certainly appreciate it, and a lot of other folks too as well.
My first book was published in 2004, so it's been 21 years now. And I started this in 1990. My first website went up in 1999, so it's been quite a long time that I've been associated with World of the Real Life Kolchak.
Yeah, you were like Bermuda Triangle guy from at the very beginning of all this. I remember that was what we had you on at the beginning. Now, you surprised in a sense, and that was like 17 years ago. You don't know this, I'm sure, but I'm the news editor for Coast to Coast AM. I write articles, covering the world of high strangeness and stuff like that for Coast to Coast. Actually wanted to mention, I'm glad I brought that up, because anyone who enjoys my writing over at Coast to Coast AM, I owe a debt of gratitude to Gian, who introduced me to the word miscreant, which I use all the time. I use miscreant probably 2 or 3 times a week in different articles for Coast to Coast AM. It is a wonderful word. So anytime I've heard people say to me, they mention that I use miscreant a lot. And that, for the folks who have mentioned that, that's all Gian Quasar. I think it was from the Earons research. Or the Jack the Ripper book, but he used miscreant a bunch, and I'm like, I love that word. But with the Bermuda Triangle, you surprised? It's been 17 years. You've been writing. You wrote about it longer ago than that. You just don't hear any Bermuda Triangle stories really anymore. It's really kind of like it's a little disappointing in a sense.
I declined to do TV. I haven't done TV since 2020, and so I've been too busy with other things. I do keep up with stuff, but I'm tired of all those shows. They don't do much anymore anyway. They don't come to you. They try and make you go to them, and that's just too inconvenient for me.
Yeah. No, I don't mean necessarily media. I mean like disappearances and stuff. It's like you don't really.
Oh well, yeah. I still check all the records and that kind of stuff, even the Bahama records and so forth.
Yeah,
a lot is not reported. I have to go underground and get some of the stuff.
Yeah. On that note, I just want to thank you, man. It's been a great run. I hope this isn't the last time we chat here on Binnall of America. I've really enjoyed our conversations over the years, and this was yet another enlightening one here, with you tonight. So I can't thank you enough. You've been a great guest over the years. It's been awesome, and it's been really a thrill to get you back on the show and digging into a whole different case altogether from the stuff we talked about in the past, man.
Thank you very much for having me.